For those of you who I don't know, my name is Karen Thorne, and I'm the President and CEO at the Ontario Media Development Corporation. And OMDC is delighted to be partnering with Magazines Canada today to treat you to lunch, I guess, and also to be bringing you what we hope will be a really interesting and informative panel presentation that will feature 3 of our sort of best practice case studies from the OMDC Magazine Fund. For those of you that are here from Ontario, I probably don't need to tell you that our creative industries in this province have a tremendous impact on our quality of life and on the health of our provincial economy, along with film and television and interactive digital media and books and music. Magazine media is an integral part of our creative ecosystem here. And with almost half of Canada's magazine titles being published in Ontario, the industry really represents big business. We create an impressive number of jobs and make a real contribution in terms of economic activity in our province. And of course, OMDC's mandate is to help you, is to help grow the industries and stimulate investment in all of these important sectors. And we do that by investing in companies and content and helping to open doors to new markets and by supporting you in your transition to new business models. I think continuous transition is probably the right terminology these days. But beyond all of those investment funds, OMDC also supports initiatives that are focused on showcasing the incredible talent and companies that we've got in this province and helping to build new business relationships. And it's to that end that we work closely with Magazines Canada, providing support for so many of the terrific programs that they run, including obviously MagNet, and it's our privilege to be part of this fabulous program this week and to work with Mark and his team year-round. I think it's also fair to say that quite a number of you have had the opportunity to get funding from the OMDC Magazine Fund, and you've delivered some terrific results on some fairly modest investments from us. And Matt's going to talk to you a little bit more in a few minutes about that magazine fund, but I will just say for those of you who are eligible to apply, and BC, you should be talking to Creative BC about whether or not they have a magazine fund. The deadline is the 10th of July, and we do encourage you to start thinking about those applications and get them in. And that sort of leads us into the panel today. The panel discussion is a continuation of our fairly popular magazine best practices series, but it's the first time that we're doing it here at MagNet. And we're certainly hoping that by sharing some of these tremendous success stories, it will help you put forward your strongest possible application, and it will help you optimize the impact of that modest but important investment in your company. So I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Please continue to enjoy through the panel. I'm going to turn the mic over to Matt Hilliard-Ford, who will introduce the panel that's coming in a moment.
I think one of my slides has disappeared. My name's Matt Hilliard-Ford. I am Canadian. It's my privilege to be a program consultant with the Ontario Media Development Corporation. It's my responsibility to help deliver Ontario's, the OMDC's activities in the magazine sector. We're thrilled that so many of you are here today. It's the largest audience that we've had for an event such as this. As Karen mentioned, our panelists are all recipients of support through the OMDC Magazine Fund. The OMDC Magazine Fund supports the business development of independent, Ontario-based magazine publishers. Funds are provided to assist in the growth of these businesses through the creation and implementation of new strategic business and marketing initiatives and digital activities that enable publishers to achieve business development and/or marketing objectives. If you didn't understand all those words in that order and your eyes glazed over, please visit omdc.on.ca, press on the magazine tab. Our guidelines are there, there's information there. My contact information is there. Please feel free to contact me with any questions you have about eligibility of your company, of the project you might be considering, I'm very happy to help. The background for this is, obviously we're well aware of this being a sector in transition, the challenge of not knowing what you're transitioning into, there being no clear route for that transition. And we looked at how else can we help? We have the privilege of an amazing perspective that we have through the OMDC Magazine Fund, through the applications that we receive of being able to identify some of the themes of the challenges that you're experiencing and also some of the potential solutions that you are considering. Then through the reporting process that successful applicants have to engage in, we get to see which of those projects are successful. So the idea for this came about through sharing that information with the publishing sector. We're very thankful to Magazines Canada and MagNet for inviting us to hold the event at at MagNet. I'm going to hand over to our moderator, Sharon McCauley. She was our first choice to moderate the panel. She is a publishing and marketing consultant, speaker and seminar leader, as well as the co-founder and publisher of CanadianGolfTraveler.com. Prior to launching her consulting business, she was most recently vice president group publisher of the Urban Group, St. Joseph's Media, overseeing the day-to-day operations of Toronto Life, Ottawa Magazine, Quill and Choir, and Wear Canada.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Magazine Publisher Success Stories from the OMDC files. We're really pleased to be here this afternoon to share with you real-life case studies of ways that publishers have taken on initiatives to transform themselves. As we had our discussion prior to the panel, we realized that there was a thread that was running through all of the conversation, which was transformations. And how are we as publishers addressing the environment, the changing environment around us? So today we're looking at 3 approaches to transformation. The first will take us on the journey of a traditional print publication that reinvents itself through redesign, and then extends that to a responsive design on the website and the amazing results that come from that. The second case study will be looking at a completely new initiative into a new field, same field, but a new product, a print product into this area, as well as developing a web app. And as someone who had never developed an app before, it was an experience that he's willing to share with you all of the various ups and downs of that particular ride. Finally, we're going to hear about a pure digital play, which really gives, I think, an excellent example of content marketing, social media marketing, strategies for driving engagement, strategies for driving traffic. And I know this is something that we're all grappling with at the same time. Let me introduce our panelists. And the format today is each of the panelists has a prepared presentation for you. We will be able to ask questions as the panelist is speaking about that particular subject matter. And then as the discussion goes on, the panelists have concluded their presentations. We can open it up to more general discussion on the environment, strategy, managing change, and whatever else suits your fancy. So to begin with, I'd like to introduce David McConnachie on my far right. He's the business manager for Alternatives Journal. And David is a seasoned publishing and marketing professional with many years of high-level, brand-heavy experience. As the former director of publishing for the National Hockey League, David oversaw the development of such classic hockey books as Total Hockey, Hockey for Dummies, A Day in the Life of the NHL, and many more, in addition to launching 3 hockey magazines. David has also taught marketing at Seneca College, been a .com CEO, and most recently was a leadership consultant in the field of executive development. So please welcome David McConnachie. Our second esteemed panelist is Sam Cohen. He's the publisher and owner, co-owner and owner of Gripped Publishing, Inc. Gripped started 16 years ago with a climbing magazine for Canadians that was published out of their apartments. Today, Gripped has a total staff of 14 and 3 other publications: Triathlon Magazine Canada, Canadian Running, and Canadian Cycling, along with their respective web properties. This year, they added a race guide app and an annual magazine to the mix with the help of the OMDC. Please welcome Sam Cohen. And leading in the final closing batter position, we have Kevin Bartus, founder and CEO of Maple Media Limited. He's one of the original Toronto digital entrepreneurs. His first digital venture, Blue Spark, was one of the most successful digital agencies during the first .com boom, with clients including Rogers Media, Torstar, CBC, TVO, and The Score. Later, Kevin was the original VP of Digital Media for Rogers Media, where he formed the initial team of 150 people and was successful in doubling revenues. Kevin founded Ayant Media in 2009 and Maple Media a year later. Maple Media is the publisher of SavvyMom, 29 Secrets, Among Men, Nexopia, and Recipe Geek, and a successful applicant to the OMDC, IDM, and Magazine Funds. Ayant Media is the advertising sales partner of Maple Media and has twice been the recipient of the Profit Magazine Hot 50 Award. Please welcome Kevin Bartus. So we'll begin the discussion today with Mr. McConnachie, who will tell us about the transformation of Alternatives Journal.
It's kind of funny, as Sharon, thank you for the introduction. As you were listing off the stops on my career path, I realized it was perfect. It's constant change. And what a perfect time to be sitting in our community today, at a time when I think, and we were talking about this earlier, where constant change is happening, but I think it's slowing down a little bit. Either that or we're starting to get an understanding. And they talk about in the world of pro sports, when you're a rookie, things go really fast. And I don't know about you, the last couple of years have been really challenging as we try to figure out, well, the ground's moving. But now there's this really exciting little buzz. And as we look around this room, there are as many young drivers of change as there are established veterans. And if we come together, we as a community have an opportunity to continue to drive and do what we do best, which is tell stories for our audiences. So let me talk a little bit about Alternatives Journal. Alternatives Journal was founded in 1971 at Trent University by Dr. Robert Pelkey and a grad student by the name of Jim White. The environmental community in 1971 was in its complete infancy. Rachel Carson, for those of you who are aware, wrote her book, The Silent Spring, was published in 1962. The Ventura Island oil spill off of California, which really created this, was in 1967. So Alternatives Journal was founded at the beginning of the environmental movement, embedded in the educational space. In fact, we were founded as an academic transfer journal. And for those who aren't familiar with transfer journals, the back third is endnote footnotes, like school texts. It served its need because there was no communication hub for this new burgeoning area of study and practice, environmental education. So we were very comfortable in that environment. As you could imagine, science-backed, peer-reviewed, it was very dense, a lot of text. It served its need. It was, however, visually constrained. There were challenges in terms of what we could do. It's difficult when you have a back third of the magazine are being used for endnotes and footnotes. You got to squeeze everything else in, and I don't know, has anybody played in the academic space? Smart people write a lot of words. And it takes like you got to hack through. You're not an editor. You're hacking your way through. Really challenging. Now, it's vitally important for the community. So we were visually constrained. We had, like every magazine, had developed a website, but effectively it was like the Web 1.0 for most magazine publishers. It was effectively a digital media kit and a home for some sort of content, but we didn't really understand. So when I say what it looked like, you see in 1971, in July, there's the first issue ever published of Alternatives. Keep that in mind, Alternatives. So it's another challenge that we faced. 1984, there was a redesign. 1990, there was a redesign. You can see these are iterations upon a theme. 1994, another redesign. 2006, another redesign. 2011. Now, I just want to point to that July 2006 time. We were still primarily, we had just started to do things like color. We just started to add some photographs. But that's at the time when Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth raised environmental awareness through the roof. And we were puttering along, serving our little community. So, to the point that that was our old website. It was a wonderful little brochure site for our brand and our magazine. However, there was problems, there were challenges, and there were, as anybody who saw Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore said, the Chinese character for crisis includes the Chinese word for opportunity, and we were facing both a crisis and an opportunity. I don't know about you, but I open the newspaper and I go to the op-ed page, and invariably there's one or two articles about the environment. There's some things happening in Canada as our brand, so there's a need. There was a heightened need in a very complex, anybody know what the difference between 350 parts per million and 375 parts per million, and what the statistical difference? I didn't know. But the average citizen needs to know, because we Canadians have to make some decisions. Are we an energy superpower? Are we the world's friendliest petro-crack dealer? Because last time I checked, the only other country in the world who had hung their hat on that was Vladimir Putin and the Russians. They're not really on the right side of history. So there was a giant need in a complex issue for clarity. When do you want the ivory towers to come down, to charge in and try to help? There was questionable brand relevance within our community and what we call the 3 R's. Publishing relies upon the 3 R's. You need relevance, you need readership, and you need revenue. And all 3 of those we were challenged. There was also a changing dynamic in terms of the demographic. I was amazed. Do you know that today, across campuses across the country, there are 150,000 post-secondary environmental students? They're young, they're excited, they're skewing differently in terms of both gender, expectation, life. Our digital brand team is a pretty good reflection of it. I'm looking at our web developer there, Jordan Teichman, comes from an environmental background, but a web background. Laura McDonald comes from social justice and communication. These are new people who care about the environment, and we had to retool our organization. We needed to reboot. Ironically enough, the reboot started because of Newsstand. Alternatives. Where does it live? Alternative lifestyle, alternative music. And what do we do with this journal? Is it a bad word or is it a good word? How do we manage that? And then finally, as we stepped into it, it's kind of like the pool, right? You dip your toe into it, and you're getting a little bit more. And then we realized that this was more than just a chance to refresh our brand. This was a chance to reboot our organization. And Bill Walsh, the championship coach of the San Francisco 49ers, had a philosophy that said before you could become a championship team on the field, you had to become a championship team off the field. Organizationally, we had to become better. So, that was the impetus. Here's the process. First and foremost, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hello, my name is existing traditional model of operations, and I've got a problem. But that's okay, because as Sharon and I were talking about earlier, it's not like the New York Times has got this all sorted out, do they? Our greatest leaders in our category are figuring this out while we're doing it, and sometimes we're doing it better than they are. But the second thing, and I know Matt talks about it on the conference call last week, talk to the OMDC. And I mean talk. Ask the questions. Here's what we hope to aspire to achieve. Because this organization and Magazines Canada are there to help you. And say, here's where we'd like to go. Can you help us get there? And more often than not, they're going to say, yeah. We might not be able to get there in 1 year, but we might be able to get there and support you in a 3-year transition. So you have to be able to talk. The other thing is, as you said, once you look in the mirror and you realize you've acknowledged a problem, is look at this as an impetus to really look at your entire operations. Engage. In our case, we were very fortunate, and I look over to my right and I see Norm and Jennifer from K9. They challenged the bejesus out of us. We're an old magazine. We're a 40-year-old magazine. But they challenged us, and they pushed us. And if you're going to go through this process, change is painful. It might as well be meaningful. Pain might as well be meaningful. So if you find a partner, give them the latitude to push you. You still have the right to say yes and sign the check, but give them the right to push you. And talk to Norm and Jen if you really want. And then our obligation was to deliver the new AJ. And we don't have multi-billions of dollars in marketing funds. So this rebrand also had to provide a platform for engagement with community. So the question becomes is, did it work? Right? That's what we all want to know. What's the bottom line? Results. It's the new face of Alternatives Journal, AJ. And I think you can see not only is it a visually impressive face for our brand, future-focused, allows us to address some of these split branding alternatives, Alternatives Journal. We get the both, best of both worlds, but the impacts on the bottom line are significant. Now that came from that readership it came from because suddenly our community went, holy cow! You're vibrant, you're alive. You don't look like you used to. How can we? Suddenly we got sponsoring. We got philanthropic funders. Somebody said, you know those 150,000, how can we help them? Because you look like the face of somebody who can help them. Pretty darn impressive for us. Here's our new website. When you talk about a tool for engagement, I want you to know that we currently serve more people with our website than we do with our traditional print magazine. When you talk about a transformation for change, it's challenging, scary. Laura over there, you know, she occasionally hides when I walk into the room with another crazy idea. But at least she knows how to do it. You know, our job in affecting change is when we have these powerful cohort of change agents, is to toss them the keys and get the hell out of the way. So, did it impact? How other impacts? Well, that's a pretty visits per month. Do you think that that had a significant upward hockey stick kind of movement? Yeah. Visitors a month. Significant wrap. Page views per month. Now, I've got to tell you, this was done on the back of the branding and redesign project. As I mentioned, when Norm and Jen, they presented us 4 options, which is new to me. I'm used to designers presenting 3. You know, the really stupid idea, the really crappy idea, and the crazy idea. They presented 4 of them. 4 were from a real subtle change to AJ. It was scary for us. But it gave us the tools to increase our social media engagement. Now, we were a brand that considered ourselves a print magazine. We're now a media organization in the vitally important environmental communication space, and every day we're talking to tens of thousands of Canadians fulfilling our role in this community. Feedback. So as I talked, remember when we talked, AJ, we have our mindset of the 3 R's. Relevance, readership, revenues. And we did this to reboot our brand on our relationships. So the first audience is our academic community, those 70 colleges and universities across the country. So Steve Kryzak from the University of Waterloo, impressed with the bold choices that you've made. Marketers are coming to us in our community to ask us. I mean, I think I heard a little while ago that somebody approached the canine folks for a full AJ. I didn't know if that was a Brazilian or a haircut or... The other endemics, the ENGOs, the environmental, non-governmental, or not-for-profits, they're a vital driver of change in the environmental community and employ about 200,000 Canadians. Fresh, current, interesting, vibrant. These aren't normally bandied around for environmental publications. The funders, the folks who write the checks. Now bright, relevant, wide-ranging, useful, and important. The information is the same. From a marketing standpoint, all we did was change the package. We're storytellers. And if the customer doesn't want to buy your product in a box, but they want to buy it in a bag, sell it to them in a bag. And here's the most important one. And this is the one that we smile at all day long. This is from Gideon Foreman, who actually influenced a lot of our change. He's the executive director of the Canadian Associations for Physicians for the Environment. Sure to engage an audience far beyond the current environmental community. And here's the thing. So many progressive journals read like spinach. AJ is strawberries and cream. Now, I get really excited when I hear that. Now, I just wanted to provide some lessons. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's going to have different challenges. But if we attack this process with a vibrancy that we are sitting at a tipping point, that somewhere in this room, I mentioned this to Sharon, somewhere in this room is the next Netflix for our category. Somewhere in this room is Dr. Dre with Beats ready to sell his business in 5 years for $2 billion. There's somebody in this room. So first thing you need to do is understand your purpose. Why are you doing this? And dig deep down into why your purpose. Yeah, we want a fresh new look. No, we want to find our footing for the future. Get your team on board. In that case, I got to tell you, we had a team vote before we decided which branding process to go through. I lost the vote. My youngest team members made the decision. And I said, yes, let's do it. Expect to be 50% uncomfortable. If you're doing something that's new and different, it shouldn't fit you like an old, comfortable pair of shoes. You know, I don't know about you, but okay, a page, it needs 500 words, we need a couple of photos. It can be pretty boring. Look at the opportunity to do something that's uncomfortable. Choose your partners wisely. As I said, we're very fortunate to have K9 come in and help us through this process. We're very fortunate to OMDC to support us both through our redesign and our responsive design. Allow them to wow you. You know, all too frequently we hire agencies and we hire consultants and then we don't want them to scare us. Their job is to scare us. You can say no at the end of the day, but if they're not scaring you, then they're not pushing you out of your comfort zone. And I think it was Mark said, it's no longer thinking outside of the box. It's thinking on the ball. It's always on the move. It's bouncing, it's changing, it's shifting, and that's where we are. And finally, communication is the key. Start with great conversations with Matt and his team, involve your team, and bring in external partners to be able to move forward and create positive change for your organization, your publication, and your media. So that's it for the AJ perspective.
David, I have a question for you, and I know many people in this room are working for publications with boards of directors, or they're in an environment where there are other external opinions that have to be taken into account. And you talked about resistance to change, being out, pushed into your zone of discomfort. How did you manage such a radical change in a university environment, in an academic environment, and with a board of directors?
It was an interesting process. In many ways, we are very, very, very fortunate to have and retain our founder on our board of directors. Dr. Robert Pelkey is somebody whose whole process, and ironically, it's in our title. We got to look for alternatives. When the status quo doesn't work, look for alternatives. So it was kind of in our mindset, but we had editorial boards that had been writing for the publication for 30 years. Some of them who have been embedded in academia. What you need to do is find your champions of change. And on your board, there's always got to be somebody, if they're fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility. You know, in the environmental community, we talk about sustainability. On a board level, it's sustainability. It's okay. We know there's a transition and there's a change. And if you can find that champion of change on your board level, get them to buy into it. And we were very fortunate, as I said. The driver of change, we had a couple of uncomfortable conversations with a board. And Dr. Pelkey just waded in and said, obviously you haven't been on campus lately. They're looking on their machines like this, and there's... That's the other thing, is bring your readers, bring your users into that equation and allow them to inform. And in many ways, that just externalizes it. Well, you know, our readers want to consume it in this way, so it's not about us. Champions of change, and bring your readers. Allow their voice to inform the process as well. And that way, it's not you against the board, it's you and the board and your readers together.
Thank you. Are there any questions for David from the floor?
Hi, you may have mentioned it, but I'm not clear. When exactly did you make this transition?
We began this process. Actually, the grant application had been put in the fall of 2011. I was brought in November 2011, and we had a new editor-in-chief brought in January 2012. We knew we had this redesign project to do, and we had to make a decision as to, you know, sometimes when new people come on board, the tendency is to try to make change for making change's sake. We knew we had this responsibility, so we took a little bit of extra time, and I know Matt was very gracious and allowed us, because we needed to think through this process. The natural inclination is make as little change as humanly possible. The natural inclination for new leadership is to make as much change as humanly possible to differentiate yourself. We tried to walk through that. We redeployed the new magazine in November 2012, and about 3 weeks later, we deployed the new website. Website was end of October, so we actually deployed the new website before we deployed the new magazine. So it was a 9-month transformational process, and we're down in Kitchener-Waterloo, and Norm and Jan had to make that drive back and forth a bunch of times, but it was worthwhile for us, definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
Now that you've done the redesign, how long do you think it'll be relevant before you have to go through this again?
That's a good point.
It's a never-ending change story.
Well, I looked at some photos of me from 10 years ago. I needed to change my look. In fact, if you would have seen me on Monday, my hair was down to my shoulders, and I'm going, you know, a long-haired hippie environmentalist is not exactly a rebrand. So I cut my hair. I think you've got to, ongoing, look for opportunities to constantly refresh. Bring other voices in to influence and share. Give them pieces of your brand, specifically your readers, that they can involve with contesting. I would argue that, you know, there's an old argument that says every 7 years, every cell in your body turns over. I would think that if our media organizations haven't investigated ourselves, if we're using 7-year-old technology to power our website, we're not serving our readers well, right? So I think it's an ongoing process. You have to keep an eye on it. But probably if you've gone to about 5 years, and if your readers start telling you, no, you're old and boring and you don't look as hip and cool as you used to. The other challenge, however, is you don't want to chase hip and cool, because that changes constantly, right? So in many ways, that 50% uncomfortable is go 50% farther. because maybe that'll carry us for an extra couple of years that we won't have to necessarily brand refresh.
So we'll, in the interest of time, we'll continue our journey on transformation and have Sam Cohen talk to us about a new print brand extension as well as a web app experience.
So I'm going to talk more specifically just about the project. What we did is we are a traditional magazine publisher. We have 4 titles that are newsstand based. We have very active and healthy websites, and they are able to generate a reasonable amount of income for us. But still we are a very much traditional magazine. And not that long ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was at one of the OMDC digital breakfasts, and I was thinking, we got to figure out a better way to do things. And so the idea that came to us was we should try and create a unique and useful app for consumers in one of the areas in which we work, and that's that was in the running area. And so really what I did is I presented the OMDC with a proposal to do 2 things. The first was to create an app, something we had never done before, and then or never done it in this way before. I mean, we have apps, like all of you will have apps that are your website's responsive, but we've never had a discrete app. And the second thing we decided to do was to enter into the free magazine market. And we have always been print, as I said before. And the reason we thought about that is that obviously with declining newsstand sales, with declining subscription revenue and subscription sales, we just thought some of our competitors are doing this. Why shouldn't we do this as well? So we were able to do both. The one thing we knew going into this was that the app market is extremely competitive and extremely difficult to make money at, and our expectations as far as profitability remained pretty low. But with the print world, we knew we had a lot of good advertising partners, and that we could certainly make the print magazine a success. And both turned out to be true. And I mean, so I'll just briefly show you on the slides. This is essentially the ISO app that we created. Now, we had initially proposed to do much more than simply the app, but the app itself was enough of an involvement. And this is currently only available on ISO. It's not, we don't have a website yet. We don't have an Android app yet, although those are definitely in the development. And it's completely free to users. Oops. The main function of this is really, it's a guide for people interested in doing running races. And what is interesting about that, as far as a market is concerned, is that there's close to 1 million Canadians who run running races during a year. So it's a relatively healthy market. And there's many millions of Canadians who run. Some of you in the audience probably do. And so the function of this app was essentially to allow people to easily find events. The app geolocates you. It lets you find the events. It lets you find out all the information about the events. It lets you on race day actually get to the event because it geolocates the start lines of the events and things like that. And essentially, the other functionality of the app was it allowed people to review events, to bookmark events, and and essentially comment on those events. So. And then I guess the final piece to the app puzzle was that we forced consumers to create user profiles so that so that we were actually in a position where we are getting some information about these consumers, information that hopefully in the long run will wind up being useful for us and potentially something we can turn around and sell to people of interest. The other part of the puzzle was the race guide, which we created. And the purpose of the race guide is it's an annual magazine. We printed quite a lot of them and gave them for free at running events across the country and through major running retailers. So the Running Room, you could go and pick up a copy. And I think we printed about 125, 150,000 copies. What this magazine did is, you can think of it as like a restaurant guide for for running events. It gave you descriptions of the events, what you can expect while there. It gave you a rating system for the events. And as I said, that has wound up being a relatively successful component of what we did. But our thinking and why we feel this was successful is that this was really about brand extension. It was about getting ourselves in front of our customers more often. It was getting ourselves in front of our advertisers more often, giving our advertisers new ways to communicate with our market. And it allowed us also to put ourselves in a more central place with the major stakeholders in terms of, like in terms of organizing bodies, in terms of national bodies, things like that. So that was that. The other, I guess, benefit of it and the way in which things changed for us is that it obviously required a fair bit of revenue for us to build this, and it did require us to hire new staff. So one of the things that the OMDC always likes to see is that we are hiring new staff, and certainly in order to run this app, I mean, it does require at least one person on it, full time to make sure that it does continue to happen. But for us, it was a complicated process. Doing something in the digital space like this, doing an app, it was something that we had never done before. And we were essentially neophytes in this space. So we met with a variety of developers and had a variety of conversations with developers. And we wound up going with the company that we felt was most exciting, gave us the most exciting ideas. And in the end, after going through the statement of work, after going through the wireframes, we discovered that the company that we had actually hired, in the end, delivered something that was far less than was discussed, and would continually refer back to, well, you didn't specify this, or you didn't say that, and it was a really frustrating process. And considering the incredible expense involved, we were not that pleased with it. So I think the big lesson that we learned from this process was that in these situations, and everyone here has been involved with websites, and those are relatively straightforward, but apps, it's a whole new language. And in these situations, it's worth having someone who is able to have those conversations on your behalf. And so, we wound up severing relationships with our initial developers, and we wound up hiring a new development company, but also having an agent on our behalf who can make sure that these conversations are clear and that our expectations and the developers' expectations are all more or less in line. So that was an important lesson. I think the other lesson, as far as the app goes, is apps are very labor intensive and they're very financially intensive. And it's one of these things that we realize we will have to keep feeding in order for it to continue to be a success. Only in that consumers expect more and more from it. If the thing stays static, it's not that interesting for the consumer. So that's wound up being relatively intensive. I think that the way in which this transformed our business is that we were no longer simply a company that was producing editorial content for our consumers. We were now a little bit more of a media company. There is a lot of consumer feedback that's involved in this process. There's a lot of consumer reviews, consumer discussions. And so I think it does give us an opportunity to step out of what was our traditional comfort zone, which was, here's the entertainment. Now what we're providing is, information that the consumers can participate with and use. As far as the benefits, the app has only been out for 6 weeks, so it's really quite new. And in that time, we've had about 8,000 downloads. So it's not insubstantial. It's not. I mean, I wouldn't say we've knocked the doors off. Only thing that's available is an ISO app. So if you don't have an iPhone, you can't look at it. So we expect that this will get much bigger and it will develop a lot better. I think also that the brand extension of having the magazine and having it around for free really does benefit our existing paid titles as well, because people do, it is Race Guide brought to you by Canadian Running, so and we do have lots of information about Canadian running in the race guide, so consumers will use it. And with that, we printed about 125,000 copies, as I said before, so it was pretty significant. We felt that this was an important space because while many of us have responsive websites, and that's important, I think it's important to be able to provide the consumer something that's a little bit different than what we had provided in the past. I think it's a great opportunity to keep people's attention, and it's a great opportunity to allow us to draw in a market of consumers that hadn't previously known us. So that's.
Sam, I have a question for you. Congratulations, 8,000 downloads. You could hear a little bit of a murmur in the room. In 6 weeks from launch, that's very impressive. What's the plan going forward for promoting and marketing the downloads, and perhaps more importantly, the continued daily or weekly engagement with the app itself?
Well, I mean, we're in the fortunate position in that our running website has probably, 100,000 page views, visitors a month. So it's, it's substantial. So for us to get 8,000 was not actually sort of, we had a vehicle to promote it. So that is obviously continuing to promote it. I mean, really, the future is for us to have a web property where consumers can sit down and type and actually have real conversations, as opposed to simply trying to type on a little on their iPhone. So that's kind of where the future lies for us. We did notice when we developed the app that we had probably about 60% of our consumers were using ISO, and at least the consumers of our website were using ISO. Since then, we've had an incredible outcry of people who want the Android version, so we have to do that as well. So that's the sort of stage 2.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Matt? Stage 2. Stage 2 is the application for the Android. Yeah, please open to the floor.
Hi. Not sure I understood. So this guide was sold, printed at the beginning?
No, it was free.
But prior to the app?
No, we have, one of our properties is a Canadian Running magazine,
yes,
which is sold. Mm-hmm. So the app, the race guide was brand new as part of this.
Okay, you never did it in print.
No, we never did
sorry,
it in print.
I thought it was you. Okay.
So we did it in print, and then we did the race, then we did the app as well.
Okay, so you didn't generate additional revenue with that app because the app is free, the guide is free. But
well, we generated a reasonable amount of revenue from the guide because we sold advertising in it. But
okay,
yes,
got it.
And the app, we have generated some new revenues, but not in the way in which one would do in a traditional print publication, because there's simply not the space to get all the advertising. So free in the app world is free still. When we were looking at apps, we looked at Yelp as something that everyone knows, and Yelp has been around for 10 years, and Yelp has almost 10 years, and it has 10,000 employees. 7,000 of those employees are in sales, so they're selling, Bob's Barbecue space on their, through Yelp, so that they can promote themselves. And in those 10 years, they have never once had a year in the black. So that is, from the perspective of developing an app, that is relatively frightening, right? What is the value in the end? Well, the value is hopefully brand extension and bringing more consumers in. But in and of itself, and perhaps the data that we're collecting about all the individual consumers, right?
Thank you.
I think the race guide is a terrific development, but the presentation of it seems very subtle in terms of branding. Was that a deliberate strategy on your part? If I looked at this, I don't see kind of Canadian Running jumping out at me or saying buy our magazine. The front does, yes,
yeah,
obviously.
It was subtle in that we are hoping to promote the website and the app as separate from the magazine. But yes, there's a fair bit of like tearaways and things inside the magazine to promote it.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kevin Bartus, who will talk to us about content marketing, social media marketing, e-newsletters, and how to increase traffic and engagement.
So a couple of quick comments based on my previous, Sam and David's comments. I ran a development shop for a while, working with people building websites, and then I was a consumer of one, a client of one for a while. If your partner isn't asking you questions, you got to find another partner. Sometimes, you don't want to work with somebody who's annoying, but sometimes when you offshore entirely, for example, which we've all experimented with, they don't ask you stuff. And a month later, they give you the product, and they say, well, that's what you said. And you go, yeah, but I'm an idiot. I don't know. I was just telling you what I thought I meant. Like, they're supposed to push you a little bit. The second thing, and I'll come back to this later in this presentation, the most difficult thing in digital, from my perspective, I've been doing this a really long time, which to quantify it is probably 15 years. I started when I was 7. I'm 23. The hardest thing is feeding the beast. The beast needs quality content. The beast needs recent content. The beast needs appropriate content. And what I mean by that specifically is, again, we've all experimented with different lower cost forms of content. By and large, it doesn't work. People really do need high quality content. They need loads of it. Google needs loads of it. Social needs even more of it. And it's really hard to keep up a decent quality level and hit all that. And in terms of appropriateness, you can't take a YouTube video and throw it on Vine. They're all different media. You can't take a tweet and put it on Facebook. You can, of course. There's automated ways to do all these things. But to take, a summary of an article and just throw it on Twitter and throw it on Facebook, yeah, it's a way to get out there. It doesn't really work, though. There's a company in Toronto, ASAP Science, that does science videos, popularizing science. And one of their big secrets, the guy will get up and say, one of the big things we do is they're each different, right? Of course, they're kids and they work 24 hours a day, so I'm not sure how extensible that model that is, but they all need different things. Early on in digital, the magazines always led because they just took their content and threw it online. And there was nothing else online, so that was great. Over time, and that's now 10, 15 years ago, over time, I think everybody's discovered that you can't totally do that. It's a good base, but you have to have content appropriate for the medium. So in terms of our own properties, so we just do websites, right? We just do digital stuff. We haven't had any print experience. So I may use the wrong words at times if I refer to that, but primarily we've just done digital for a long time. These are two of our leading properties. We've had IDM funding from the OMDC, thank you, for both of them as well as others. Both of these have been successful recipients of the Magazine Fund, and those are the projects that I'll talk about now. My colleague Sarah Kunar is here, who does 29 Secrets, so I'll try to get it right, and if I don't, Sarah will correct me, hopefully now and not also later. The Baby Post, the editor, Natalie Milne, couldn't join us because it turns out when you run a site about prenatal stuff, you get pregnant, so she's on mat leave. So for 29 Secrets, it's women's fashion and beauty. This site, there's a lot more money in the beauty category, as you know, than in, for example, relationships, but relationship content is much more popular. Most of our sites, we tend to blend in content that we know is going to be popular with content that advertisers are going to want. So Sarah and I were discussing earlier today, we recently reorganized so that some of the racier stuff wasn't on the homepage when Disney was going to see the homepage. And you have to think through that. Like, your audience is the consumers, but it's absolutely advertisers as well, unless you're a paid thing, obviously. So this is the Magazine Fund application from a couple years back. You'll find once you start putting stuff online, as you all do, you get a lot more US traffic than Canadian traffic because there's a lot of Americans. It's fine for lots of purposes. I have two companies. Maple Media is the publisher, and then Ideon Media is the ad sales arm that sells into the Canadian agencies. We need Canadian eyeballs. So the point of this project was largely to get Canadian eyeballs, increased returning visitors. A lot of Sarah's strategy is around fishing where the fish already were, like making sure that the people, of the set of people you're addressing, you try to get a bigger and bigger portion of them. So we weren't getting as many repeat visitors as we wanted. The mobile experience. Mobile, I mean, I don't know if you guys follow Mary Meeker. Mary Meeker puts out a report every year on internet trends. It's a 164-page this year report. It was out last week. It's something like last year, 11% of web consumption was on mobile, and it's 19% a year later. It's a big growth. So that's North America. In China, I don't know what it is. Like, it goes up higher and higher, but it's really big. And mobile, of course, has been around for a while, but it really didn't matter that much until a couple of years ago. And it started mattering really, really hard recently. So that was a big part of it. Newsletters was a big part of our strategy. Increasing contests to get subscribers. The easiest way to get subscribers for email is contests. And then the responsive news website. One comment quickly on email. Email's not the cool kid anymore. Social is, obviously. But you can sell ads on email. You can sell blasts. You can sell, advertisers like email. It's more direct. The list is more familiar to them. Social's hard to sell ads on. You can get a big Twitter following and not make any money. So this particular thing, and also it was 2 years ago, so this one we concentrated on responsive and email. Again, why half our traffic at that point was from smartphones, and our site wasn't responsive. It's a silly experience. You're pinching and extending, and so we needed to do a responsive design. Google's smarter than anybody, right? But they don't know what's going to be in the future. So every year, not even every year, man, every month, continuously, they're messing with their algorithm, messing with it. So recently, for example, we found an uptick in traffic because we got good at Pinterest a year ago. We didn't get good at Pinterest because somebody told us Google would value Pinterest. We got good at Pinterest because our users were on Pinterest. Pinterest is sort of a Twitter with pictures. If you haven't seen it, it's an interesting, and for lifestyle websites, it's very useful because it's pictures. People have to click on the picture, go to your site, so it's good for traffic. I'll come back to this point, but you want to concentrate on what you think your users want, not what you've heard Google wants, because Google is trying to figure out what your users want. So if you can get ahead of that a little bit, and it's hard to know the future, but that's what Google's trying to do. And they got a lot of real smart people trying to figure it out. So if you try to game what they did last year, it never works, man. You're just never going to be as smart as they were, and they're going to keep changing it. They're not, their algorithms, they're trying to satisfy users, not the audience. So how or why? Because the traffic was mobile. Because we would do more integrated campaigns. When you're selling campaigns to advertisers, as many of us do, in fact, the more different things you have, a little bit of newsletter, some on the site, some sponsored content, the less it's apples versus apples versus other people. People will talk about CPM rates and declining competition. If you're not only doing a CPM campaign where you're selling banner ads for 14.5 cents because someone else sold at 15, if it's a completely custom program that has these different elements, now it's a different conversation. Right, it's harder to compare you to somebody else. And this isn't in this presentation, but the exchanges and the networks all sell at much, much lower rates than any of us are able to sell at for individual sites. But they can't sell sponsored posts and they can't sell email programs. So the more you can integrate that stuff, the better story you have for advertisers. And then finally, and people have made this point, our audience is in their 20s and they kind of want what's cool. So if you don't have a responsive design, it doesn't speak to certainly the audience you want. So in terms of, oh, sorry, I didn't skip. Oh, I'm going backwards. In terms of what things look like before and after, I'm not a design guy. I don't know why the second one's cooler than the first one, but it is. I do know for mobile, it's relatively obvious if you go to a site that has a responsive design versus one that doesn't. It can affect your advertising. There are more ad units on a website page than there are on a mobile page. So our salespeople were not in favor of a responsive design. But again, ultimately, your goal is to satisfy users, and it does come around when you do. And so we just bit the bullet and did it. The newsletter, total subs to date, 22,000. The main strategy with the newsletter was doing regional editions, right? So a Toronto edition, a Vancouver edition, Calgary, et cetera, as well as some of the different sections. So rather than one overall, one for beauty, one for relationship. Sarah can talk more to this, but a lot of A/B testing on what would work in terms of times of day. Open rates, not surprisingly, change for time of day, right? I'm not sure if I have this right, but I think early in the day, usually people open stuff. If you do something at midnight, they don't, it's just buried in their inbox by the time they get up in the morning. Optimizing contest forms, again, there's a lot more detail in this, but in general, when you force, if you force it, if it's a negative option, right, for this contest, you have to sign up for this newsletter. People opt out like crazy as soon as they can after that. Sometimes it's okay, it can work. It's certainly better, especially with these new laws, to force people to make the conscious choice to opt into your newsletter. And when you force people to make a conscious choice, or when you give people a conscious choice, certain colors work better than others. Green is a color go, red is a stop. There's different kind of psychological things to all these different things. One of the big lessons of the web, though, is you're just not going to be smart enough to figure it out. Try a bunch of stuff. Things work and you don't even know why they worked, right? You don't know why that font worked, why that color worked, why the size worked. So by all means, try to put a bunch of thought into it, but try a bunch of stuff. And one of the challenges we often have working with advertisers is the creative agencies, by the time they give you the creative, here's the creative, and that's got their blessing, and it's based on some TV commercial or something. You guys may have the same experience with magazines. We know certain creative works, but very often we have trouble going back upstream to change it. But when you're doing these kind of opt-in things, you have to try a bunch of stuff. In terms of results for 29 Secrets, bounce rate went down. This would be Sarah's wording, not mine, woohoo. Pages per session went up, the session duration went up. The percent of mobile traffic, this isn't related to the redesign, but or maybe it is, but mobile continues to grow for our stuff. Mobile in this includes iOS, includes Android, includes tablet, but the mobile continued to grow. Newsletter, same thing. Returning site visitors was high. You're marketing to people that already have opted into your site, that already have some interest in your site, so they come back to the site. Percent of newsletter traffic grew. And then the Canadian traffic, which was a big deal for us, grew as well. It's still a relatively low number given that we're in Canada. We often have trouble convincing advertisers we're even Canadian. We have to take them to the office and these people are here and they're really actually in Canada. But it does work. Advertisers would, on balance, prefer to advertise with publications that are based in Canada. Some of it's supporting the home team. Some of it's knowing that you can customize your content to what they might want. So on Baby Post, which is a parenting magazine. It does concentrate on prenatal and early stage, differentiated specifically. A bunch of us were at Rogers before, and we wanted to differentiate from a general interest parenting magazine by focusing on that early stage. There's a lot of money in that, and it was a good sort of way to differentiate from existing publications. We bought something called SavvyMom a couple of months ago, so Baby Post is now kind of subsumed into that umbrella title. So SavvyMom Group is Baby Post, Urban Moms, and SavvyMom. The goal of the project was, again, increase subscriptions. You'll see on this, though, there's a little more social media. So it's a year later, and things change in the web a lot. And sometimes you want to be, the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm thing. You don't want to be way early. You want to be kind of in the bulk of when things are happening. So in the first application for 29 Secrets, social was important. It was just much more important by the time we did Baby Post. So we did an email newsletter strategy as well. But the main focus of the second application was to hire a social media manager, somebody to just, as I call it, feed the beast. A little bit of a challenge because it's across all the brands. For this one, though, was specifically on feeding it with Baby Post. Again, the results have been strong. These numbers aren't enormous, but in terms of percentage increases, they're quite strong. So subscribers, nearly double. Social media followers across all the platforms, percent of Canadian traffic went up. And then the bounce rate as well, which is a focus of ours, has gone up. One final thing that I threw in here was just stuff I wish I knew 5 years ago, some of which wasn't knowable 5 years ago, but a couple of just quick points. One is social can be as good or better source of traffic than search. An awful lot of people still, search is important. There's no question it's important. It continues to get important. But search now includes your social dominance, right? Google will reward you if you have a higher social following, which is a weird sort of circular logic. But you have to kind of feed the beast in all of its different incarnations, if you will. The second thing, everybody tries to cheat Google to gain traffic when they start. They got some real smart people over there. So for the most part, it doesn't work. Keyword stuff, all these things used to work. There were periods of time when they worked. So you could, keyword stuff, meaning if you wanted your site to be found for prenatal guide, right, you could just put that thing in there 500 times and put it in the meta tags and put it in the alt tags for your pictures, just put it all over the place, and it would totally work. Google eventually, though, again, smartest people in the room, they sort of downgraded those sites. And once you're in the Google penalty box, it's like 2 years. Like, it's not like they reevaluated next month. They got other things going on, right? They're very busy over there. So they'll come back and recrawl your site, but you don't want to do anything that intentionally tries to cheat the system. You do want to help Google find your site. You do want to help it know what it's about. So if you're doing a story on chocolate cake, you want to say it's on chocolate cake. You don't want to say it's on grandma's favorite recipe from when I was a kid. Nobody's searching for that. They're searching for chocolate cake. So you do want to mention the thing that you want the site to be known for, but don't try to get too fancy with it. That skating to where the puck is thing, not that I'm a hockey fan, although I understand there's a whole thing going on right now with that. I don't know if you guys saw LeBron last night, though. That to me was the thing to watch. So that general sense of Tinder, for example. Tinder right now is a very hot keyword. If you'd done any keyword analysis at all a year ago, it would not have come up. It didn't exist a year ago. So you have to sort of start to, and this is largely to Sarah's credit, but think about what you think your audience is looking for now and will look for, and Google will get there. They'll eventually be rewarding you for that. You want to sort of get a bit ahead of it. Third point, and this may be more obscure, but very often when you start to do digital campaigns, you will sell a campaign that is larger than you can deliver. The client will have bought 100,000 impressions, 1 million impressions, whatever it is, and you won't be able to deliver that in time. And you will think to yourself, I will buy traffic. I went online and these guys will sell me traffic for a penny a click or 2 cents a click or whatever the number is, right? The numbers don't work out. They never work out. It's a penny a click is about a $10 CPM, right? $10 for 1,000 of them. You got 3 ads on a page, $3, great. Sort of average CPM is $3. You're gonna sell it for more than that. Everybody seems happy. The traffic's fraudulent. It's always fraudulent. So anything less than kind of 10 cents, 5 cents a click is probably fraudulent. How do I know it's fraudulent? I don't, it just is. And so when you talk to RTB people and Google people, there's real clever people trying to figure out how these guys in Chinese dorm rooms will set up real cheap traffic links. Bots are operating all night, taking over people's computers and clicking on sites. A million different ways they're doing it. It won't get caught for a couple of months, and you'll think you're the smartest person. You've created perpetual motion, and then it'll get caught. 2 years in the penalty box. Like it just, because all the ad networks will know about it. They use really sophisticated stuff. Fourth point, the writers themselves end up being a very effective way of promoting their own content. So I used to be much more uptight about letting the writers talk about the content in different media, right? Use the official Twitter account, use the official Facebook page. It turns out that's just stupid. Let the writers play with it. Like, let them promote it to their own Facebook page, let them promote it on Twitter, let them play with it. They're gonna wanna be proud of the content, and they're gonna wanna promote it. There are models where you can pay for them to push more traffic to their own thing. That can work, I've seen it work. It's a little more complicated to model. I'm sure there are union issues and other issues with it, but in general, let the writers play with the content they've created. And then that last point, which is what I started with, volume does matter, but so does quality, and it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to figure out how you pay writers enough to produce quality content in enough volume that matters to Google. There's many famous examples, and I won't single out publications, but who tried to do a really small number of really high quality pieces. That doesn't work anymore. I don't know where it works. Maybe it never worked. Maybe it used to work. I don't know. It doesn't work anymore. You got to do a whole big volume of really high quality content, and it's really hard to do it. We have not figured it out. We've tried lots of different things. We're better at it than we were 5 years ago. But to me, it is the central challenge and the central trade-off of digital publishing.
Thank you, Kevin. So those are the voices of experience who have gone ahead and on the transformation journey and taken these different paths. I'd like to thank the panelists for participating and being so open and transparent and sharing their experiences, the pros, the cons, the numbers, which we were all quite eager to see. In the final seconds, I do want to say that one common theme that did come out of our discussion from the panelists: work with the OMDC, contact them, have the conversation about any ideas that you may have for the transformation of your publications. They're here to build capacity in the industry and particularly to help with the magazines themselves manage this transformation in a changing world.